Hi, my name is Candace Kelchner, and today we'll be discussing two different theories or learning theories. The first being the theory of cognitive development, and the second being the zone of proximal development, also known as ZPD. So, to begin, we'll begin by discussing the theory of cognitive development. So, what is it? Who created it? We'll be discussing that. So, Jean Piaget used genetic epistemology, the study of where thoughts begin, how they originate, how they emerge, to create his theory of cognitive development. So this theory tried to understand how thoughts develop and how they mature so that individuals can understand the world around them. Now, there are many components and many aspects that fall into the theory of cognitive development, but what we're first going to discuss is Piaget's 4 stages of development. So let's move over here. Now, these 4 stages depict the process of how thought evolves, develops, and how particular aspects highlight certain achievements. So the first stage that we'll be discussing is the sensory motor stage. So typically this occurs from birth to age 2, and what's important about this stage is that children are able to attain object permanence. So object permanence, what is that? That's the ability to understand that something is still there even though it's hidden. So for example, if I have this charger right here and I hide it behind my back, is the charger still there even though you can't see it? Yeah, it's right here. So even though it was hidden, you were still able to know that it was still there. So this type of thinking is achieved by children from during this stage. So moving to stage 2, the pre-operational stage. This stage occurs generally between the ages of 2 and 7, and it symbolizes the development of symbolic thinking. So symbolic thinking is when you have an object and you're able to pair it, connect it to some other idea or some other concept. So for example, if we had the eagle's a bird, and yet it can also fill people with a sense of patriotic pride as it represents the United States of America. So we have the eagle connected with another, a different topic, such as, patriotic pride, the American flag. And this creates a sense of symbolic thinking. Now, moving on to stage 3, we have the concrete operational stage. So during this stage, children, ranging from the ages of 7 and 11 are able to think logically. So that means that children are able to internally process different outcomes from their environment, which without physically having to do something. So for example, if there is a boiling pot of water and you're using, logical internal thought, you can already tell and understand why touching the boiling water would be a bad idea, and why you would burn yourself. So, you'd be able to see the water bubbling, boiling, and, from that you can see steam rising and, heat's being produced from this water boiling. And, the steam, it's hot. So if you put your hand over it, you say, oh, that's warm. And then, as I get closer to, the source of the heat, it gets warmer. So putting my hand in there would be a bad idea, and I would most likely hurt myself doing that. So thinking logically like that, we wouldn't have to touch the water to know that that would be a bad idea, that we would burn ourselves. So this process, thinking logically, being able to think things through internally, is highlighted within this concrete operational stage. And then finally, Piaget's 4th stage of development is the formal operational stage. So this typically begins around age 11, goes into adolescence or the teen years, and then it reaches and extends into adulthood. So this stage really highlights and hallmarks the beginning of, you know, abstract thinking, being able to think creatively, being able to think logically, being able to think in a problem solving sense and frame of mind, and then using all of these different aspects that allows, you know, observations to be drawn that could be then tested in, you know, hypothetical experiments, and being able to test your own hypotheses. So all of this is very important to the cognitive, excuse me, the cognitive theory of development, but there's also aspects that help these stages move along and progress. And one of those aspects are schemas. So we're gonna zoom in over here. So a schema is a piece of information that signifies how someone should act or behave and interact within their environment. Now, there's multiple forms of schemas, and briefly we'll list them and then we'll go back and explain each one. So there's 4 different forms. So we have innate, assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. So looking at the first one, innate. So innate schemas are, it's what it sounds like. It's something that comes innately to us, something that comes naturally to us, that's instinct. So for example, babies have a tendency to latch and to grasp onto things. So if you were to put, you know, a bottle of formula near a baby's mouth, they would instinctively latch on to that bottle's nipple so that they would be able to get their food and their nutrients. So that is an example of something that automatically happens, something that instinctively happens, something that innately happens. That information that instinct told them how to behave and how to interact with the stimulus, the formula bottle. So that information is their schema, told them how to interact, how to and how to behave within that scenario. So moving on, we then have assimilation. So we're gonna come over here and pull up the assimilation box. So assimilation is a thought process that is based off current information that we already have. So this thought process, it tells us how to interact within our environments. So for example, if I go into Five Guys, I know that first thing, I'm gonna look at the menu, see what I like, go to the cashier, order what I'd like to have, then stand off to the side, wait for my number to be called, pick up my food, take it to the table, and then throw away my food once I'm done with my meal. All of those steps, all of those ways that I was interacting within Five Guys was based off prior information that I had already formed. And that was assimilation. I was able to take my prior experience, apply it to entering to Five Guys, and successfully interact within that Five Guys environment. So, but what happens if I had used my prior knowledge to some new environment that I haven't had experience with, but it seems kind of similar to the environments that I've previously experienced, but it doesn't pan out the way I had thought? That is accommodation. And for that, we'll scroll down right here. So accommodation is when you need to recraft some schemas, recraft the information that tells you how to interact with experiences when an environment is new, different, or it's changed. So that way you can change it, understand through problem solving what happened, how I need to interact in the future. That way, if that new situation were to come up again, but later in life, you would be able to use that new or that learned information and apply it to how you should interact and behave a second time. So what's important before we move on to equilibration? What's important between assimilation and accommodation is active learning. Active learning is essential to both of these because it engages and forces, or it encourages, not forces, it enforces, it encourages, active learning encourages problem solving, the ability to think, okay, if I do this, what will happen? If I think this through, if I internally think about this, how can this change? How can I better interact? This internal thought process, this problem solving helps assimilation and accommodation. And it allows you to navigate through your environments more effectively. Now, over here, we're going to move and pull up the equilibration box. So equilibration is what furthers an individual's learning development. It's what pushes it forward and advances understanding and learning and thought processes. So when you are able to successfully pull up your already pre-existing schemas, your thought processes, your internal instructions on how to interact with a environment, successfully pull those up and then use them successfully, that is what's furthering learning. And when you're able to do that through assimilation, that will encourage your learning process and how you're maturing and getting closer through these 4 steps over here: your sensory motor stage, your pre-operational stage, concrete operational, and formal operational stage. So this, the ability to use your pre-existing knowledge and apply that to future scenarios, aka assimilation, the assimilation schema, you're using equilibration and you're pushing forward your knowledge process. So other aspects that are important to the theory of cognitive development is readiness. So readiness is important because one of the things that Piaget mentions is that learning has to be, it can't be forced. If someone is not internally ready, their thought process isn't fully developed to handle a certain concept, they're not going to understand it because they haven't connected those links or made those connections yet. So readiness is important, especially for classroom settings, because particular lessons, they need a certain prerequisite sometimes, a certain understanding, such as like the abstract thinking, such as the symbolic thinking, in order to really connect with whatever those classroom activities are. So readiness is just making sure that concepts are age appropriate they're stage appropriate to where a student is in their learning and their thought process, so that they can truly understand and make those connections. Now, also, what's important, so we talked about active learning. This also connects to discovery learning. So Piaget really advocated for discovery learning, which is allowing a student to, through problem solving, by engaging actively with their environment. So, it's problem solving, that's connecting, that's doing activities, that's, really like learning by actively participating with their environment so that they can interact, make connections, and move their thought process along. And this concept of discovery learning is something that's also shaped elementary schools and their structure. And then we see that through the way, teachers carry out curriculums and the activities that they plan, and how, activities can reinforce this active learning, discovery learning type thinking, where students are really asked to just really interact with the concepts and the ideas to further their understanding. So this is the theory of cognitive development, and all of this will end over here on this point. All of this research and studying that Piaget has done through the theory of cognitive development has really shaped how classrooms are structured and has really shaped how the educational system works. And it's become a very important factor in how our students learn. So thank you for listening. And up next, we'll be talking about ZPD, the zone of proximal development.